Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tower Babble podcast. As always, I'm Julian Musha. I'm joined by Daniel D'Souza.
Yo.
And we don't have Jeremy here today, which is a little unfortunate because we are doing our annual Oscars preview show. We always get excited about this show. Jeremy couldn't make it this year, unfortunately, but that's okay because we've got lots of movies to talk about. For those who are not aware, our typical format for the show is to just kind of talk about predict the show and discuss how the show is actually going to be, the actual presentation of the Oscars. Review, quote unquote, discuss the Best Picture nominations. We try to be realistic and think, we can't watch all the movies nominated in every category. It's just not possible. So we pick the Best Picture noms and we watch those and we'll discuss those each, one by one. And then we'll do a quick prediction for some of the major categories, the ones that we kind of have a stake in. And we'll do two types of categories for that. So the who we think is going to win and who deserves to win. And basically, who has the best taste versus who can predict the actual outcomes the best.
Yeah, who predicts the Academy the best versus your own personal taste.
Right. So that's the show. Before we get into everything, I will remind everyone to follow us on Twitter at TowerBabblecast, Facebook.com/TowerBabblecast, and head over to our website, towerofbabble.ca, to find everything that we do, including a spin-off show that we do called Small Screen Star Wars. There's going to be a lot more discussion on that show soon. There hasn't been a lot of Star Wars on the small screen in the last few months, but with Bad Batch coming up on May 4th, and a lot more news about the Obi-Wan production and the Andor production. There's just a lot happening. So look for one of the episode of Small Screen Star Wars soon. We're also we're continuing our TOB Film Club series on the Patreon. Daniel, what movie are we doing this month?
We're doing Armageddon.
Armageddon.
Classic
Yep.
Michael Bay Armageddon.
Mm-hmm. I was telling Jeremy about this recently, but I saw a clip from the commentary track with Ben Affleck from that movie, and it was very, very funny. So I can't wait to talk about it in more depth.
Okay.
When we actually review it. So that's on the Patreon, patreon.com/TowerBabblecast, and we do a movie or two. We kind of did two last month with Mission to Mars and Red Planet, and this month again kind of two with Armageddon and Deep Impact. But you only truly have one assignment if you can look at it that way. Anyway, that's on the Patreon. You can find that there and subscribe for as little as $5 a month. Okay, let's get into this because we have a lot to cover. Actually, there's 8 Best Picture nominations, each with their own interesting stuff to kind of discuss. But let's talk about the actual format of the show because we're living in as they like to say, unprecedented times. For those who don't like to actually use the P word, so. There's some changes to the actual format of the show. And before we kind of get into that, the first question, Dan, I have for you is there, before I tell you any about this stuff, because this is all going to be new to you, okay, is there anything that the Oscars could do to make the show more engaging for you? To make it more interesting, to get you more excited about it?
I mean, it's tough, especially in a year like this, because one of the biggest draws is the crowd, having everybody there physically, and that's just not an option right now. I don't know that there's anything they could do to draw me in personally. I don't usually tune in. I usually just look them up afterwards because it is a 4-hour long show, and
well, it's gotten to 4. Guys. It's gotten to 4 hours in the past. They really last year they really tried to keep it to 3. That was a big push to keep it to 3 hours. I don't know. I think it still went over by a little bit. Hard when you have people, there's things that are just not in your control, like how long someone's speech is, for instance, right? So whatever. So this year there's a lot that's different. So for the first time I'm going to read now, by the way, from a couple different pieces from Vanity Fair, from Mashable, and from goldderby.com, which is a website I didn't know about. But they follow, their whole deal is just following races in Hollywood, basically, different award seasons and stuff. It's
really?
That's their thing. Yeah,
that's hilarious.
It's pretty cool. So I'm gonna read from different pieces. So for the first time in the 9-decade history of the Academy Awards, streaming films that did not get a theatrical release will be allowed to compete. So that was one of 2 decisions that was made way back at the beginning of the pandemic, which is actually, I think, fairly prescient of them to say hey, this is gonna be very different. and we're going to make some tweaks to our rules. And they've already been getting shit at that point about not being forward-thinking enough. So I think fair enough.
I mean, that's the thing. There was already, you know, calls for that pre-pandemic, right? Like the streaming sites like Netflix particularly putting out films like Mudbound was nominated, but it had to have a theatrical release in order to be qualified for a nomination. Like, but they're putting out quality stuff nowadays, so it kind of doesn't matter anymore. I think the pandemic aside, it would have happened either way.
Yeah. So anyway, that's cool. I thought that obviously makes sense. The second change, and these decisions were made at the very beginning of the pandemic. The second change was to push the ceremony from February 27th to late April, which is, again, where we are now. The actual Oscars themselves will broadcast on ABC from multiple venues on Sunday, April 25th, with red carpet arrivals starting at 6:30 p.m. Eastern and the hostless ceremony starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. So the move or the push to late April makes sense because they figured, hey, we're going to need more time. The one thing that's interesting about that is it's not just the change of the date of the show, but they changed the deadline for eligibility and extended it from December 31st to February 28th. So there's actually like a whole extra 2 months worth of movies that were up for nomination. Not that it seemed to matter very much because the movies that did get nominated were, I mean, it's tough. We'll talk about this when we get like closer into these movies, but I just think like this list this year is not as strong as we had in past years, but a lot of big blockbuster movies have been pushed out.
Well, that's the thing. There's circumstances outside of everybody's control, so that affected the entire slate of films.
So those are the two kind of just not as exciting changes, I would say. But here's where things get a little bit more interesting, and because of the pandemic, things are a little bit more, I think, allowed to be a little bit more creative than they might have been otherwise. So multiple venues, stylistically different. That's kind of the thinking that I kind of noticed here. So as we mentioned earlier, the Oscars themselves will be held in multiple venues for the first time. In Los Angeles, the ceremony will be held at both the Dolby Theater, where the Oscars are normally held, and Los Angeles' Union Station, which we've seen in 1,000 movies over the years. To account for international nominees and guests who can attend the U.S. event, the Oscars will also have have ceremony outposts in both London and Paris. So they actually are bringing people together for this. There's going to be in-person events
in
smaller groups, and there won't be international travel. The production itself will be shepherded by, among others, former Best Director winner Steven Soderbergh. So he's going to be kind of organizing and running the show. And the quote that I think is most interesting here, and this is from a story from Vanity Fair. The most exciting thing about this show is that it is going to look and feel like a film in the sense that at the end, we hope it'll feel like you watched a movie. So
interesting.
That is interesting. So here's a couple more pull quotes.
Got a lot here.
This is Steven Soderbergh again. I had opinions like everybody on how the Oscars shows have been presented in the past. This was an opportunity to try some stuff, Soderbergh said. Frankly, if this wasn't a pandemic year, a lot of the things we're going to try wouldn't get approved by the board or maybe even by ABC. So it's kind of a strange alignment of planets when they approached me. There's an opportunity here to rebuild what this show should look like and feel like, again, from his perspective. Now, I think a lot of this is like, there's a little bit of showmanship here. Like, really, what are you doing that's going to be so bold that ABC would be like, absolutely not? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they still care about it. Like, it's still an important ceremony to them.
It certainly lost a lot of its luster over the last several years, I would say. Would you feel that?
I think the numbers definitely show that. I think fewer and fewer people are paying attention every year,
That's
unfortunately.
True. And the award seasons the award shows we've seen since the pandemic have had really poor ratings. I think the exception to that was the Emmys or what's the music one? The Grammys. I think the Grammys had a good turnout. But either way, because I think that makes sense because there's live performances that are like worth watching. Right? That's not really what's happening here. I've always thought it would be really cool to have like these like if you're doing like you got these best actor categories and all this different stuff, like to have like them come up and like perform a scene in front of the audience.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a little cheesy, but like I think
makes more sense for the Tonys probably. But
yeah, maybe that's true. But yet if you put a camera up there, okay. So Soderbergh continues. Community is a really important theme. What we've lost in this time and what we've found in the importance of storytelling. The Oscars are different than every other award show, or at least they like to think so. We are cinema romantics. We hope this is a love letter to people who make movies. Okay. Everybody will be a character. Every nominee, every person that gives an award, we feel like characters will feel like characters in a film. And in the end, you'll know who everybody was and what they wanted. You'll have a connection to everyone in the show. What we want to do is have this 3-hour movie in which some awards are given out.
Okay. Hey, listen. Interesting enough. I mean, I'd like to see it in practice, of course. But that does actually, you're right. It does kind of entice me. Now I'm more interested in watching the actual live show.
Right. Like, what does that mean? Yeah. I'm so curious because he goes on. There's another piece here where he starts talking about the intro to the whole thing, and then he cuts himself off and does it. And he's like, "Oh, I don't want to spoil anything."
Cool.
I don't know what. I feel like he's talking up a big game here. I think the concept of making a 3-hour award show feel like an actual 3-hour movie is fascinating. Can it be done practically?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
And will it be an interesting movie? Will people want to tune into?
I don't know.
Movie?
It might be more interesting than some of the movies we're going to be talking about right away.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a good chance of that.
That's very possible. So who? I know, Dan. I know you want to ask this. Who's going to be presenting the awards?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, because there's no host this year.
Okay.
Right. Again, this is the second year in a row, no host. But again, the way the format is, this more kind of cinematic format, maybe this makes more sense. Okay, so Soderbergh and his team have already compiled a starry list of quote-unquote performers, right, including 2020 acting winners Renee Zellweger, Joaquin Phoenix, Laura Dern, and Brad Pitt, as well as Angela Bassett, Halle Berry, Bong Joon-ho, Don Cheadle, Bryan Cranston, Harrison Ford, Regina King, Marlee Matlin, Rita Moreno, Reese Witherspoon, and Zendaya. And there will be more.
Yeah.
But I think that's a pretty good list there. Does anyone stand out? Like, I think Bong Joon-ho presenting is really cool, and obviously last year's winners often present. That's
typically
how
it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Harrison Ford is interesting because he's so, to me, notoriously like a curmudgeon. Like, right. Do we really? What's he gonna do?
But that's also that's the role that he plays now too. Right?
Well, I guess
that's his brand, if you will.
Is it? I
think so.
I think it is now, but I don't think it's on purpose. I don't think he's putting on a show.
Who knows, man?
Doesn't seem like it. I don't know. I've never met him personally, obviously, so it's hard to tell. But he does seem like a grouch, and I honestly kind of
it's still kind of endearing though. He's grouchy, but it's like your grandpa that you're like, okay,
go crash another plane or whatever. Yeah. And then so what about the music? Because we were just talking about the Grammys, and there's typically the best song. Nominees get to do a performance during the actual Oscar ceremony. You'll remember specifically your favorite movie from a couple years ago with the singers with what the heck is it called? It's been remade 4 times.
Stars Born.
Stars Born. Thank you. When they did the performance on stage, and it was that was really nice.
It was pretty good.
Yeah. So this year, that's not happening. The Oscars are like I said, are gonna air at 8 p.m. Eastern, and before the ceremony begins, ABC will broadcast a pre-show hosted by actors Ariana DeBose, I don't know, who had a starring role in the Netflix musical The Prom, and Lil Rel Howery, I've never heard that guy either, who makes a memorable cameo appearance in Judas and the Black Messiah. The 90-minute pregame show called Oscars Into the Spotlight, according to ABC. The show will highlight the nominees' journey to Hollywood's biggest night, give fans around the world the ultimate insider sneak peek to the party, and, for the first time, bring Oscars music to the festivities. So the show itself is not going to have the best song nominees in it. Those are all going to take place in the pre-show if you want to see them. So there and there's actually going to be a post-show now too, because they have to do that for everything.
Yeah, because it's a trilogy, right? So they want to make it like a movie.
Right.
The pre-show.
Right. So you have the pre-show is the
prequel.
Is the prequel. Then you have the actual show, and then you have the sequel, which is more like Talking Dead. I feel like it's going to be kind of like this idea that they've had now for a while on different kind of premiere shows. So it's going to be like let's unpack the Oscars that just happened.
I think
yeah. So that, I don't know, if you want the whole day experience, it's there for you, is what I'm saying.
You gotta want it. You gotta want it bad, because that's a whole day.
yeah. And here's the thing. So like, you know how people get really excited about like the gowns and the things that people are wearing, like, and the designers and all that stuff, and that hasn't been present for the other award ceremonies because you have like Jason Sudeikis appearing in a hoodie when he won his Emmy, you know,
Right.
and so this is a big deal. He came on, he looked so tired. I think he was in London, so it was like really late, and he was just in a hoodie, and he was accepting his award for,
good for him.
I think Ted Lasso, by the way. I have to get one mention in the show.
Loves Ted Lasso.
It's a good show. So anyway, they're saying they didn't say for like specifically you have to wear formal attire, but they kind of like very heavily implied it. Like if you're gonna show up, casual is just not cool. So there'll be some of that too for those who care about it, which I'm not one.
Yeah.
But I know there's people out there who do. So nothing against them. Okay. So anything I just jump out at you as it being particularly interesting? Obviously, we discussed the kind of the movie format, but anything else that's kind of like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is a year where certainly it's going to be different, which on its own is kind of an enticement, right? Mm-hmm. That's an incentive to watch. I like that they're at least trying or sounding like
right.
They're going to be a bit more of a radical approach. So maybe, again, it might entice me more to actually tune in. I doubt I'll be there all day. I'm not going to watch a red carpet, a virtual red carpet, or whatever it is.
Hey, man, to each their own. I've now seen more virtual red carpets in the last, and there's been virtual red carpets for movies even before the quarantine. This has been a thing. But, I watched the virtual red carpet for... What the hell did I watch it for? Star Wars The Mandalorian, I think season 2. They had a virtual red carpet event. I watched the red carpet, pieces of the virtual red carpet for Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Sure. Okay.
So anyway, there's been different things. I just think they're often overly produced. And
they have to be, because otherwise it's just people on a Zoom call, right?
Yeah, which is what they don't want here. That's what the Oscars are trying to avoid. And I think, honestly... if they can do it in a safe way, and it doesn't, then I think that's what you want. I don't think that the Zoom call award show is interesting. I don't think people care.
And it is, to be fair to them, it's tough. You're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
You can't. It's irresponsible to have people gather, and it's not something that people want right now, anyways.
Right.
But you do want to celebrate these movies, and it's a big deal for these people. They've worked really hard on these things. So how do you make it, worthwhile?
Them? Yeah. It's tough. I think that's why that's why it's so interesting to do this kind of new cinematic format, because it really you've got more control over elements than you maybe not normally would in a kind of live stage performance. Okay, so let's get into the actual movies themselves, because I know that's what everyone. Marcos in the chat, always happy to have you here. Ted Lasso, a win in every category. That's what he says. And honestly,
I'm sure you guys are right. I'm sure it's a delightful show.
Highly recommend it. Again, but we're talking about movies here today, okay, Marcos? Okay. So let's start.
And to be clear, full spoilers for all these movies.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, that's because it's really hard to talk about them otherwise.
Almost impossible. So it's all the Best Picture nominations and probably a couple others. If you haven't seen, just be aware that there will be full spoilers out there.
Yeah, and I saw this list of Best Picture nominees. I just pulled, the order is pulled directly from the Vanity Fair article that I pulled them from. So I don't know if they editorialize that in any way or whatever, but we're going to start with Nomadland. This is a Searchlight Pictures. So Searchlight, by the way, used to be Fox Searchlight. Now it's just Searchlight. Right. I don't know if when you saw it open, it goes dun, 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 and you're like, well, okay, the fanfare. I'm interested in that. And it's funny though, because typically you're used to the big Fox lettering on the top and then Searchlight underneath. But with Fox gone, it's just the Searchlight. It's like they just removed a whole shelf.
Didn't even notice.
I don't know.
I don't pay attention to
That's
those
funny.
Things. That's funny.
So that's there. Again, we talked about this when Disney acquired Fox, but they kept Searchlight as its own separate studio, which typically has been doing these kind of smaller, kind of more indie style movies for a long time, and good movies. So more prestige. So Nomadland. This is directed by Chloe Zhao. The synopsis is: after losing everything in the Great Recession, an old woman embarks on a journey through the American West, living as a van-dwelling modern-day nomad. Stars Frances McDermott, David Strathairn? I don't know. Linda May, Swanky, Swanky, and Bob Wells, among others. So I guess where do we want to start here? So for me, I'll just say that I've heard that Nomadland is in a lot of ways like leading in people's predictions to win the Best Picture. It's won in other other award shows.
All right.
This was surprising news when I heard it because, for my money, it's one of my least favorite movies I saw this year out of the lot. I just found it to be really self-indulgent and a little and boring.
That's interesting.
And like and it's like it feels like it's telling an interesting story. Like it thinks it's telling an interesting story, but I don't think that the story it's telling is interesting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You'd have to buy in. You definitely have to be on the main character's side, which isn't necessarily difficult. But she's playing someone who's deliberately an outcast, someone who's a recluse who doesn't necessarily seem to want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of boring because her character doesn't necessarily really go on much of a journey. She kind of stays effectively the same.
Very stubborn, one might say.
And it's a little frustrating too because it's like she has a safety net as well. She doesn't have to live like this. She's just choosing to. So and power to you if that's how you want to live.
Right.
But then I don't really see a lot of conflict in the movie, other than her conflict with she's not able to assimilate into like quote unquote regular society.
Right, and it's called Nomadland, and it's like this living in a van dwelling modern day nomad. It's like this idea of like understanding or exploring this nomad culture. I don't think this movie even does that really. It partially does. It kind of does in a sense, but I don't like that. For me, is that what would be, again, we're judging it on the movie, and we can only judge it from our own perspectives. But a movie called Nomadland that's designed to talk to you about, or just in my opinion, what it sounded like it was trying to say was, here's what this culture's like, and I didn't really get that sense because it's extremely lonely, and maybe that's what they're trying to say, is that the nomad cult life is very lonely. But if that's what they're trying to say, mission accomplished. But if there's a quote unquote community, we barely see them. She barely interacts with them. She doesn't like any of them really, or you know, like.
Well, that's the thing. The degree to which they are a community is pretty low, right? They're just a group of individuals who have a few things in common. But they prefer, again, they're recluses, right? They prefer to be on their own.
Right.
I think it also does a great job at showing the beauty of the natural world, and that's something that you're only really exposed to if you live this type of life, or at least to that degree.
I suppose, yeah. Right. There's some pretty cool moments where she's just in nature, I think. Yeah.
So there's some really great shots of just the van driving, the sun setting over the mountains, and it's picturesque. That part works. I'm not personally sold on the lifestyle. It's not.
I mean,
but to each their own. You know,
it's kind of funny because I lived on a boat for a short time, and it's not really that different. Than living in a van. Like it's very similar.
A floating van.
Yeah, it's essentially just a floating van. So I had but a little bit more luxury. There's a bathroom.
It just sounds cooler than saying I live in a van. Even if your boat's a piece of shit,
it's much more romantic. It's much more romantic
for sure.
So I've been when I was going through these movies, I'm set up on the mission. Every year I get like nominees are out. Here's the movies. Remember the Oscars are in a couple weeks, and inevitably what ends up happening is we watch them all in the last week leading up to the show.
Last possible minute. I was watching movies yesterday.
Same with me. But that being said, some of them I'd already seen. So like Trial of Chicago 7 I'd seen before, Mank I'd seen before. But for the ones that I hadn't seen before, I was doing like a one tweet review, or trying to get like a one tweet review, my thoughts down.
Sure.
So for the ones that I do have that, I'll just read it out and I'll let you kind of maybe dissect it a little bit or think about it. So for this one, I wrote naturalistic, claustrophobic, and lonely. A film that was, for me, a fairly tragic story about those on the fringes and just at the poverty line. Though the photography is stunning, I also don't think I like deserts very much.
The desert is one of the less interesting natural phenomena.
Right. I think so. Yeah. So I still think it's very like raw in like quote unquote like in a good way, I think, but I just don't think there's enough there for this movie for me. It's just it's a lot of like, hey, look at her be miserable for a while.
Yeah, it's something that a few of these movies, there's a couple themes amongst these movies, and this is one of them amongst Nomadland, particularly Minari as well.
Yeah.
Sound of Metal to a degree. It's just like it kind of is just like a slice of life, like a day in the life of these people. You know, they have their sort of everyday struggles, and it's kind of interesting, but it's kind of similar also to everybody's everyday struggles. It's like, yes, you know, you have to shower and you have to figure out how to get yourself food and water and stuff. You know, doesn't make it necessarily less interesting. It did for me, but not for other people. Obviously, that's why it's nominated.
Yeah. I'm that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, what about this movie is captivating people? What's working for them? Because it's obviously not for us. But like, if you can try to
Well, I'll
put
tell you
yourself in
what.
other shoes,
For sure, the acting. Frances
Frances
McDormand,
McDormand does
of
a very good
course,
job. Yeah.
remarkable. The story itself, it's cool. It's something that it's a type of it's a culture I was entirely ignorant of. So it's interesting in that sense. I do like the way that they handle the sort of like the human elements of these people who live their lives on the road, and they have like I think it was Swanky, the character, was telling the story about the swallows in this one area flapping around her and reflecting off the lake, and
that's cool.
Really beautiful moment. I really think the movie would have been better if she hadn't actually gone there and visited that had just stayed as something the audience creates in their head instead of her visiting the
because
it's
not as cool looking in real.
It's just better if you created your own fantasy, right? But so it's great at painting those pictures. It just as a whole, it's kind of a boring ride for me.
Right. I also found it boring. I could see again from a character standpoint where I can't even remember the character's name, to be honest. Where the Frances McDormand's character goes through this journey where she kind of emotional journey about losing her husband and then having to come to terms with that, and then really basically not coming to terms with it for a long time.
But like we also not to, I don't want to linger on this movie too long because this podcast could go hours. But we also kind of join her after she's already well along on the journey of getting over her husband. Like she's in the latter stages of it. It's not like this is fresh. It's but she's learning the tools or whatever, right?
I would agree with that, except for the sense that because the fact that she kind of refuses to confront it, it puts her in the position that the movie starts us in, which is like, hey, she's not confronted her any of the emotional trauma, and now she's living in the life of a recluse.
Fair enough. Yeah, so she's been in denial this entire time. I don't think that the movie explores any of those other stages. Like she doesn't seem to progress through any other stages.
She's at one moment where she walks into her old house and we get to see that view that she always talked about, loving able to see the desert and whatever. I'm like, man, I don't see it, but
I guess maybe I'm not being entirely fair, because the character she expands her horizons a little bit, and she allows herself to visit her boyfriend's house. And potentially she considers moving in with the family, so she dips her toes in the water of that life and decides that she doesn't like it and reverts back to what she knows. That could be viewed as a victory for some people and as a regression for others. That's up to the audience, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's hard because there's no real clear arc for her.
Right.
There's some kind of there's some moments that it seems like she's kind of learned lessons and kind of come out on top, but the movie ends basically like the movie starts.
Yeah.
She hasn't really moved into a different kind of part of her life, except from an emotional standpoint. She's kind of come to terms with how she lives, I think, in a way that she maybe didn't have before. So
maybe,
I don't know. That's our thoughts on Nomadland. I don't understand why it's getting as much love as it's getting, but it's not a bad movie, I would say. Okay, so let's move on to The Trial of Chicago 7. Now, this is the movie. Of all the movies, I haven't seen this one since it released, so It's been a while. This is written by Aaron Sorkin and directed by Aaron Sorkin. Synopsis is the story of 7 people on trial stemming from various charges surrounding the uprising at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Illinois. This stars Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Sacha Baron Cohen, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michael Keaton, Frank Langella, John Carroll Lynch, Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance, Alex Sharp, and Jeremy Strong. Really strong cast here.
Yep.
I think a lot of them are wasted in this movie, unfortunately.
Because there's so many of them. Because everybody has a handful of scenes here or there. Nobody really gets. I honestly was expecting much more out of Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Not that he did a poor job.
Barely in the movie.
He wasn't given as many scenes.
Yeah.
And I get the impression that a lot of his ended up on the cutting room floor because they kind of made him seem like a more important character than he ended up.
He seems like he's going to be the main character of the movie at the beginning of the movie, and then you don't see him for basically the rest of the movie, not till the end again. So. I like this movie. I think it's very entertaining, but I don't think it's as I don't think it dives as deep into this event, this real world event that's very important as I think it could have. It very much feels like there's a reviewer critic that I like quite a bit who talks about Aaron Sorkin's movies and the stuff that he does, and instead of action, his stuff is dialogue. So his action is dialogue.
Absolutely.
Right? So this feels like an action movie version of trial of the Chicago 7. You know, the quote unquote, or not quote unquote, the actual historic event. But it's like really much like the Hollywoodized version of it.
Well, sure, yeah, it's a dramatization.
But it doesn't feel as I was gonna say naturalistic as Nomadland, which feels very like raw and real, and like it feels like it's in the real world. This, although it is technically in the real world, it doesn't feel as real to me.
It's like it's well, certainly it's surreal, right? Like most of the stuff that Aaron Sorkin writes is kind of like that. Nobody really thinks and speaks like
no one talks like that. But it's like
they're just
that's
so
okay.
quick and snappy.
That's okay because it's entertaining.
No, and it absolutely is entertaining. Yeah, the movie itself is a little aimless because it's focusing so much on the trial itself. The characters, you don't really get to explore enough of each one's separate backstory. It's all sort of done through a handful of flashbacks. I'm going to say something I know people say it all the time nowadays, and it sounds trite, but this probably could have been a TV series, a Netflix series,
right?
Because then you would have the time to explore each of their different factions a bit more. There's like a handful of scenes in it, and you don't really get enough of their backstory again.
It's interesting you say that because this is a Netflix movie. This is
that's
produced by
yeah.
Netflix, and they're like, no, we'll make this a movie. And like,
it's perfect.
Aaron Sorkin, this is I think his second time as directing the film, and not just writing, because he historically was the writer, obviously West Wing and stuff like that. I still don't think he's fully like mastered the directorial skill tools yet. It's just like again, this is just it's a very like by the numbers, kind of like cut back type movie. It's not doing anything interesting from a directorial standpoint.
I think I'd agree with that, but I think that to a degree means that he has mastered those tools because it's so conventional. Like
maybe
it's like he knows how to make like a straightforward directed movie.
Right.
But it is like it's a bit too easy. The lines are too clearly drawn, which is like the opposite of a critique of some of the other movies. But like it's like the judge is purely just the bad guy, and you are definitely on the side of the defendants. It's just cut and dry. In that sense.
That and there's just so much like sarcasm all the time, and it's like I don't just feel like the stakes are very high here, and you guys are just like throwing up quips. And I don't know because I don't know how true to life these characters are necessarily in some cases. For instance, like the Sacha Baron Cohen character is like really over the top, and I understand that he was quite like boisterous in real life as well. But I wasn't completely there for Sacha Baron Cohen's performance in this movie either.
I loved it. He was hilarious.
But anyway, it's like I think this is, like I said, a really entertaining movie that highlights something I didn't have a lot of knowledge in. I didn't really know anything about this. I kind of heard about this trial of Chicago 7 before. I didn't know really any of the details. So there's some really fascinating stuff in here about like how the one black man was like tied up and bound, and that actually happened in the courtroom, and like I don't think they spend enough time dealing with that in this movie because it's a pretty crazy thing that happens, and it's like comes and goes pretty quick in this movie.
Well, it's tough because you're right. Like if you're writing the movie from scratch, you would almost want to omit that because that's too much of its own story. But it is a piece of the actual history, so you have to have it included. What I would say is Trial of Chicago 7 contains spoilers for Judas and the Black Messiah.
That's so funny because you actually get to see a clip basically from that movie in Judas and the Black Messiah. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's interesting though. I feel like this happened last year too with Churchill. If it was last year with Darkest Hour one, right? Gary Oldman one.
I think that sounds right. Yeah,
because that movie and there were two other movies about Churchill or.
You're thinking Dunkirk?
Dunkirk? No, because that was in a different year.
That was a different year. Yeah, because that was.
Anyways, I don't remember off the top of my head, but anyways, there's this, and I feel like there was one other reference to Bobby Seale or Fred Hamilton in one of the other movies, and I'm on to you, Hollywood.
There's a lot. I mean, hey. Listen, this year there's a couple themes. Civil rights is definitely one of the themes in this year's like batch of films.
Absolutely. Yeah. Revolution as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that. I think maybe I don't know. Do we want to skip right to Judas and Black Messiah and we can come back to because it seems like a natural kind of like double bill.
Yeah.
You have any other thoughts on Trial of Chicago 7?
I mean, I agree with you that it's an action movie with words, which makes it one of the more entertaining of the Oscar movies that we watched.
It's very Aaron Sorkin. Taste. It's very Aaron Sorkin. So if you like Aaron Sorkin, you'll like this movie. I think the kind of the litmus test I think for this movie is if you like The Newsroom, you'll like this movie. But again, a lot of people don't like The Newsroom.
Yeah, I mean, I love The Newsroom, but what this doesn't have is that conflict because it's so easy to side with the defendants. Like, that's why I was expecting more of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character,
right?
Because you see that he kind of is conflicted. Like there's hints at it, but you just don't get enough time with his character to explore it. I think that would have served the movie better if he was more conflicted, and as much as then that makes it a movie, more about him than the defendants. That would have.
But I mean, there's also 7 defendants, so it's like you don't really have all day to spend with. You could use a surrogate like Joseph Gordon-Levitt to kind of like to show the conflict that maybe was going on in society at the time, that kind of thing. But no, we're just stuck. It's just very kind of surface level, I think.
Yeah, 7 different defendants in what, like four different factions, call it, right?
Yeah, I think it's like
5?
Yeah, it's like hard to wrap your head around.
So that's a 10-episode series, and 5 of the episodes, one of each of those 5 is exploring one of the different.
And then you could do the whole trial as its own, like multi-part.
The trial is like interspersed between each episode. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. But
it's too late now.
Hey. We're here to review the movies as they are, not as what we want them to be. Okay? Got to remind myself that all the time. So let's talk about then, good double bill, Judas and the Black Messiah. This is a movie directed by Shaka King. The synopsis is the story of Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, and his fateful betrayal by FBI informant William O'Neill. It stars Lakeith Stanfield, Daniel Kaluuya, Dominic Fishback, Jesse Plemons, Martin Sheen, Dominic Thorne, Algie Smith, Lil Rel Howery, and Jermaine Fowler. I'm sure I butchered lots of those names. I apologize. So this, I think, when I'm thinking about these movies, these 8 films that are nominated of a possible 10, I'm thinking, what are the must-see? Because sure, they're all nominated for Best Picture, but I would argue they're not all must-watch movies. This, I would argue, is a must-watch movie. It's very, very good. I really, really like Judas and the Black Messiah. I think it's in that sense about naturalistic and feeling real and raw. This movie, it does do that, I think, with a very similar story to what Trial Chicago 7 is dealing with. And it makes you really angry. I felt like really just upset most of this movie, and but at the same time, really gravitated, and I think on purpose. Like, I think you're really supposed to, Fred Hampton is like a very, as a leader, is like you can see why people would follow him, right?
Oh, of course.
And you're like, man, that guy's cool. I hope he gets everything he wants, and that's not what happens. Spoilers: that's not what happens in this movie. And
for a while it is, but not.
Sure,
he doesn't really get what he wants in the end, of course.
And that being said, I don't the titular Judas in this movie. I don't think his performance is as good as I think he was getting a lot of praise. I didn't think it was as great as maybe it.
It's hard because he's very believable as the member of the Black Panthers. Like he's a very believable informant in that sense, right? Because he's selling them and also the audience. I also didn't think it was like I wasn't really paying as much attention to his performance as I was Daniel Kaluuya's.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the movie, there's that clip of the actual guy, the actual William O'Neill. And Lakeith Stanfield really kind of sounded like him. Now, clearly that's just a small clip, but I think that he was embodying that man, and whatever other footage they have, he used. So I think he did a good job in that sense.
Yeah, there's a lot to love in this movie. I think it's historically interesting. Like this is again based on a true story. This is really fascinating. This way that we look at. We're talking about civil rights. There's, obviously the Black Lives Matter movement, all that kind of stuff over the last year, and this idea of defunding the police and all that kind of stuff. And you look at what the FBI was responsible for here, and it's really it's really fucking crazy what they. And so Jesse Plemons plays this like FBI agent, and I thought his performance was really kind of interesting in the sense that I think he also felt conflicted, but ultimately went along, towed the company line, right?
Because what do you do, right?
Yeah.
That's his job.
It's
a different time, and it is interesting because he did demonstrate some confliction, right?
Right.
Or some conflict, and but then at the end of the day, when he's in the conversations with Billy O'Neill, it's win at all costs, and he's very much the ends justify the means.
Yeah,
you're gonna do this thing no matter what.
Well, but he's also painting this picture of look how the Black Panthers are no different than the KKK, and I'm like, man, that's a stretch. Like that is, but sure. I mean, again, they paint the picture there, and it's obviously designed to sound kind of crazy from our perspective, right? Knowing what we know, hindsight being 2020 and all that kind of stuff. I really liked this idea or this concept of how when Bill O'Neill comes and he has these conversations with Jesse Plemons' character Roy Mitchell. There's this like stark contrast in like the quality of life that he's exposed to. Like he goes and he has these nice restaurants or to his house, right? He comes to his own home, and it's just like he could never even imagine having the thing, like these like really basic things that we kind of take for granted.
Well, it's not even basics. I think it is luxury items.
Maybe
too,
luxury
right?
stuff.
Because
Yeah.
I feel like every scene that Jesse Plemons is in, he's eating something luxurious. It's like a steak or oysters or something like that, or there's a cigar or scotch somewhere around. There's always some piece of the finer things in life.
And it seems like, from Bill's perspective, he's like, I can use this quote unquote job as an informant to give me a leg up into that world.
Yeah.
But really, he's just a pawn. He's just being used during the whole day. I mean, like it's a really good movie. What are your just overall thoughts on it, I guess?
Definitely probably the most entertaining of the ones that I've watched of the Oscar movies. This is the one that most closely fits my personal, taste.
Yeah.
So you're going to see it on that list later on this episode.
Okay. Fair enough.
But yeah, very, very, very much a gripping story. Something that I also was more or less ignorant of, like to varying degrees. I've heard of some of these people a bit. Obviously, I think earlier in the podcast I said Fred Hamilton instead of Fred Hampton. So there you go. That shows you how much I know, right?
I didn't pick up on that. But if you want to throw yourself under the bus,
I feel like that
you're welcome.
But anyways, yeah. So it's interesting to be introduced to this stuff. I love that these types of movies are being made, and again, that through line throughout a lot of these is that rebellious spirit and being defiantly yourself, regardless of what society tells you or what situation you're in. I think that I like that these themes are at least being explored and expressed in today's day and age, because there's a lot of things. There's a lot of parallels between what was going on back then and what's happening now, of course, right? It's in the news every day. So it's good that people are thinking about it.
I agree. And I really loved, I think Daniel Kaluuya's performance in this movie is like top-notch, like really great stuff. Like really, really, really quality acting. And like his like way he explains, and again, I don't know how much of this is like real speeches versus kind of like Hollywoodized stuff or whatever, but the way he explains his position and how he's able to kind of bridge these kind of like long-standing like divisions in their community is like really beautiful stuff. And I just, like I said before, it just makes you really upset the way that this movie kind of plays out, and
the way that history plays.
Yeah,
out,
right? And exactly
the way that revolutionaries are suppressed.
Well, and
every single time.
And that was what I was going to get to, like that he didn't see himself as like a social, quote unquote, social justice warrior. He was a revolutionary,
right?
That and like in that time and place in the United States, it's like to be a revolutionary would take a lot. And he was like very close to like reaching that kind of like tipping point and having like a full, basically being like the next help me out here, Daniel. Martin Luther King.
I think a lot of people do look at him, or the next Malcolm X. Definitely.
Right. And he was positioned to do that and to create real change, within their own society, like as if it was a bad thing that that could happen, right? That the FBI felt that because they want to change the way like their lives work, they should be murdered.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a much more complicated conversation than we have purview for here today.
Yeah,
of course.
It's just so crazy. It's just a really great movie, and this is a Warner Brothers film as well. So I recommend, if you haven't seen and talked about must-watch movies on the list so far, I think this is the first one, in my opinion, that's a must-watch. Okay, where do we want to go from here? Let's talk about another movie that I think for me is a must-watch, which is Minari. This is an A24 film. It's directed by Lee Isaac Chung. The synopsis is: a Korean family moves to Arkansas to start a farm in the 1980s. Very simple kind of idea. It stars Steven Yeun, I think, maybe pronounced, Yeri Han, Alan S. Kim, Kun Jung Yoon. I'm sure I'm Jung Jung Hoon, and Will Patton. Again, for sure butchering these names. I apologize to if anyone is listening and they know how to pronounce these names properly. I'm so sorry. Okay, so let me give you, Dan, my my Twitter review. This is I started stretching them to 2 tweets because it wasn't enough, because I have to do an intro to. By the way, this is a review for our best stuff, so I'd like to miss out enough.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
It doesn't matter. So Wow, what a great film. I was captivated by this movie from start to finish. Every character is compelling with an A-plus performance, but there's still enough that's left unexplored. Every scene is exactly as long as it needs to be. This movie says a lot with very little. There's themes of perseverance, passion, faith, hope, love, and despair, but none of it is melodramatic, I didn't think. It feels grounded in truth. I'll admit it was getting a little rocky about halfway through the third act, but it really sticks the landing. So,
Okay.
What were your thoughts, overall thoughts? On this
I mean, I would agree, but probably not to the same degree. Like it works for me. It is another movie similar to Nomadland in which like kind of nothing happens. You know?
Yeah, but this movie is so much better than Nomadland.
It is because there is sort of a bit of a constant tension,
right?
But it's just it never flares up to the melodramatic levels. Like I think you're right. It doesn't stray into melodrama at all. But it's almost like that tension is also suppressed and not talked about. You know, it's subtle, right?
Yeah, and I think, what's cool about that is that the sense that I get. And having read people's reviews and whatnot after having watched it, was that it's very true to the Asian immigrant experience in the sense that those types of stresses aren't talked about. You don't talk about them. They're just things you deal with, and they're part of the family, and you don't talk about them outside, and sometimes not even in the family.
Fair enough. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily make a compelling movie.
Fair enough, but I think that it actually does explore a lot of those things. And like I said, in that kind of brief review, I think every scene is exactly as long as it needs to be. It does not overstay its welcome in any one moment, and it covers basically one summer. It seems like it's not really that long of a timeline in this movie, but like it's a stressful time. Mm-hmm. It starts with this, I think, what is a compelling notion, I think a lot of people, this idea of kind of picking up your roots and going somewhere else to try to make something of yourself in a new world, right? Somewhere different and new. And, they pull up in this car and there's just like a trailer on this patch of land and you're like, what is this? Right? You don't really know what the heck's going on. And it slowly starts to unfold kind of this family with a son that has a heart condition. And you're like, why do they keep telling him to stop running? I was like, well, that is so. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. But then you find out, and this idea of this man who has decided, and for better or for worse, he's decided that this is their like kind of last shot, right? At kind of doing something with their lives.
No. It's but the thing that's different is it's about him. It's his last shot, right? Because they had a life in California that the wife was fine with.
Yeah.
That they were saving up money, they were paying the bills, they were completely fine. He just wasn't fulfilled.
Right.
So I mean, relatable. Of course, everyone deserves that feeling, and you should pursue those dreams. But he also dragged his family across the country and put them through this for ultimately selfish purposes. She was on board. I just wish they explored. I wish there were more conversations
between the husband and wife?
The two of them, with her kind of expressing her doubts. I
mean, I don't know. They kind of. There's these shouting matches that they have, and this you kind of see it as a family dynamic, less of kind of like a man versus his family.
Right, and what ended up happening, which is something that I didn't expect, is the movie ended up being a little bit more about the relationship between the boy and his grandma than the husband and wife, right?
Yeah, which it's called Minari, which is like, you think, you watch the whole movie, I don't know if it's earned. I don't know if it earns that title.
Don't get me started on the titles, man. The father is the most uninspired title. I was furious. I would drag, like, going into that movie. I was so mad. Like, why? No matter what your movie is about, you can think of a better title than The Father.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. But and Minari, I'm thinking like, what are they trying to say with this title? I don't know, but I don't know if it necessarily earned that title in this movie, just based on where it kind of goes with this kind of just this one random crop that grows on the side of the river.
I guess maybe there's an analogy that the Arkansas water and air is good for the little boy too, and the Minari grows, and it's how and he's flourishing in that environment too, and to stick to the plan. Right. I don't know. That's a stretch.
That's one thing. That's why I don't know if the title really works, but here's the thing. This movie and The Father both are like, hey, someone should really. I was like, I should really call my grandparents, because they, it's
someone
like someone should call. I should call.
Is there like a service? Is there like an app I can use where somebody calls my grandparents?
Yeah, exactly. And so I called them yesterday just to say hello, because both of these movies, both of those films, Minari and The Father, deal with like old age, and I think in a kind of not in a great way. It certainly makes it scary looking
in a realistic way.
Yeah, maybe. We'll get to that when we talk about The Father.
Yeah,
but the grandmother in this movie, I think, is really kind of the like best parts of this movie. Like her performance is really, really great. I think all the performances here are really, really great.
Yeah. Stephen Yeun too, showing a lot of range.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, like Will Patton, who
his character's a bit of a caricature.
Yeah, I guess so. I just think he's just a crazy person, basically.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and like you could say religious zealot, but I think it's more than that. Like he's clearly mentally unwell. And like sure, he's in the Bible Belt in the 80s, so he's literally dragging crosses. Like it's crazy stuff, but like I thought it was really endearing. And it really kind of came through as being a really kind of nice story of friendship between someone who didn't kind of want help. And like I don't know, I liked it. Maybe for you to come off a little bit too ham-fisted, maybe.
Yeah, he was too cartoonish with the Bible thumping stuff, and for that to pay off, there needed to have been more between the two of them, which there wasn't. Right, he just kind of showed up and started working, and yes, he's carrying a cross around, and they just, they don't address it. It's just a thing that he does.
Yeah,
Again, not enough time in the movie to explore every single character, so they had to be choiceful, but. Yeah, that's a missed opportunity.
I just found it. I just thought that this was just like you mentioned like having there's this underlying like stress under the movie the whole time. I think it really drives the movie. This kind of that, and it really keeps you invested, even though like what's happening isn't necessarily like really like quote unquote exciting.
Yeah, it's a story about farming.
But it's I thought was really gripping. Because you're always like, what's going to happen next? Are they going to succeed? Are they going to fail? I think it's like unpredictable, interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, just now, like a similarity that I'm drawing is the movie Fences, which also has this slow building tension.
Yeah.
The difference between the two is that tension in that movie comes to a head, and there's that apex moment.
Yeah, this movie has a weird ending. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I say it sticks the landing in the sense that I think from an emotional standpoint, I think it sticks the ending. But I come out of this thinking I would like to know what happened to them.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
Like where's the give me Minari 2. Like fast forward, what happens with the kids? Like this, because like even like the daughter, I think, who is she's not really even in the movie that much.
Not really,
but I think she kind of like she has a clear personality. I think everybody in this movie has like a really defined personality, and you kind of understand where everyone kind of sits pretty early on. And it really helps you understand what the dynamics are between each individual because you get these different scenes. I just thought it's really kind of nice.
Definitely agree. It's a very well constructed film.
And I think there's some sort of weird loophole that it gets to be nominated for Best Foreign Film as well, even though it takes place in Arkansas, right? And I don't...
Well, isn't that the Best Foreign Film, isn't that more about where the film is made?
I think so. And I'm pretty sure it was made in Arkansas, but like...
No, or like made by a Korean production company,
right?
Korean cast and directors.
So I don't know what all that stuff. I just remember seeing some stories about how like it was kind of weird how Minari is getting nominated for that, despite that it's like set in the States and stuff. But I don't know if it matters. But if it does win Best Foreign Film, it could maybe it'll pull a Parasite and win both.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Minari?
No, we can move along.
Okay. Let's move on to Promising Young Woman. So this is a Focus Features film directed by Emerald Fennell. The synopsis is: a young woman traumatized by a tragic event in her past seeks out vengeance against those who cross her path. This stars Carey Mulligan, Bo Burnham, Laverne Cox, Molly Shannon, Clancy Brown, Jennifer Coolidge, Max Greenfield, Alison Brie, Christopher Mintz-Plasse? I don't know. Connie Brilton, Chris Lowell, Adam Brody, and Sam Richardson. This movie, here's my quick Twitter synopsis. I said, intense, angry with a capital A, and just the right amount of heightened, by which I mean a lot. Shots of people's reactions are brilliant. I think it does this really cool thing where it lingers on people's faces.
Yeah.
And I think that the performances there are really good. Part of it is actually parts of it are actually insane. One gripe, I think it drags a bit at times.
Really?
I think it does.
Yes.
I think it totally stumbles in the third act. So overall thoughts, I think this is like the most kind of Hollywood of all the movies here. It's very like stylish and kind of like maybe it's not the most. I don't know if that's the most fair, but it is very stylish for sure. It's the most stylistic of all of them. If you Mank is very stylistic
Mank
too, but in more of a modern sensibility.
Yeah, sure, fair enough.
And it's like I said, angry with a capital A, and it's kind of self-destructive. I don't know if it actually lands on what it's trying to hit, and I'll kind of explain that a little bit in a second, because I read a really fascinating review by what's her name? Hold on, loading. Alicia, I don't know how to say this. Siddiqui. She's a film critic, and she hated this movie. So I was like, I don't have the right perspective to have a complete picture of this film. So I read and again, I didn't search this. I didn't search this take out.
Mm-hmm.
It came. I found it on Twitter. It was recommended by, or I saw it retweeted by another critic. And I just found it really interesting, from a woman's perspective, which we don't have here on the show, obviously, thinking that this movie was self-indulgent, that it treats its women characters poorly, despite what it's trying to get across, and that their decision to kill the main character at the end of the movie was they didn't appreciate it, and I appreciated their take. And I agree that I think having the character die in the third act, I don't think is. I don't love the decision. I don't think it makes the movie better. I think it makes it worse. So overall, I don't know. I think it's really uncomfortable, the movie, the whole time, certainly, and it certainly leans into that a lot. And I think its casting choices are on purpose. I mean, they cast people that you recognize. But ultimately, I don't think nobody in this movie is a good person. Everybody is a bad person, or doing bad things, right? So it's like, it's a complicated movie. I didn't love it, but I think it's certainly entertaining. And yeah, I don't think it sticks its landing. I think it has It should end at a different place. It tells it's got these kind of like through line of this whole like romantic subplot that is kind of wasted, I think, in a lot of ways. And it's kind of like it's kind of got a couple different movies. It's all over the place. The way it kind of has its chapters kind of, I don't know. I don't love the way it's structured, and I don't love its pacing, and I don't think that any of the characters are particularly compelling. So, and it's fine. I think it's a fine movie. I don't love it.
That's insane.
You really like this movie?
I completely, categorically disagree, okay. I think. No, I thought the main character especially was very charming. I do think that the movie, first of all, I think for me, it was the biggest surprise out of all the Oscar movies.
Well, I certainly was not expecting this.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Biggest surprise, and maybe probably the movie that had me the most invested, close to it. Or I was very much into this movie more so than I expected to be. The one where I had the largest roller coaster, the one with the biggest dips.
Oh, it's all over the. Yeah, I mean,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it seems a little manipulative. I think in parts.
Yeah. But I mean, all movies are, right? Like,
yeah, in varying degrees.
But that's what it was for me, because like I agree with you. She did not come off as a quote unquote good person for the first half of the movie.
I don't think she comes across as a good person for the entire movie. But that being said, I don't think she deserves to die in this movie either. I don't.
No, I'm completely. I think she does come off as a quote unquote good person by whatever definition that is. I think her death. It's unconventional. A lot of this movie is. But it works for me because that ends up being a slightly more realistic story. That's how these things end up.
I don't know.
Not the death, but the fact that things typically get swept under the rug. That's what you thought was happening. And then at the very end, the cops do end up coming and arresting the
Yeah, but that's why, to me, that's why it's the most, it's like kind of, it comes off as silly.
Yeah, like having them arrested at the end probably was not needed. But they're just putting a cap on the movie, whatever.
You could end it on the text message maybe, and then
maybe,
or whatever.
I don't know. But they had to follow through with it, I guess. But I think it works, especially her death does work for me. it's not like you like to watch it. But,
no.
But I think from the way that the story is set up, I think it does kind of. How else could her story have ended? It's not like she's gonna have a happy ending with Bo Burnham.
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that either.
No, of course.
But I think that like the main character, like as the main character, she's very self-sabotaging in a lot of ways. Where she is almost similar to Nomadland, where this traumatic event, and by the way, one of the things that they talk about in this review that I was reading that I found really fascinating was that this is all a culmination, or it all comes all the events coming to a head from a traumatic event that happens before this movie.
Yes.
Right, and to a character that we basically don't know or get to know anything about. That event is discussed, but we don't learn anything about that person. It feels it's just like, hey, this happened, and it's this crusade to try to for basically revenge. It's a revenge crusade, but we don't know.
Some would say justice,
right? Some might say that, yeah. Except yes and no, because she goes after those responsible and those who aren't of that specific event, right? So, it's the culmination of that stuff, but we never get to learn about that original person that it happened to.
I think you learn enough through exposition. Throughout the movie, you understand how important Nina was to. I remember Nina. I don't remember the main character's name.
Right.
Cassie. You see how important Nina was to Cassie, and the impact that Nina had, that Nina's death had on her life. I think you're right. It's a good parallel to draw between Nomadland and this movie. There's two characters that are dealing with loss or tragedy in some way, and are. Or in maybe some ways not dealing with it, choosing not to deal with it, right?
Well, or maybe not in the most healthy way.
And what I think is, or what works well in both movies, is there's a scene in Nomadland. It's I think her sister, and in this movie, it's Cassie's father. Who's the character says, you know what? I understand that this thing happened to you, and we miss Nina as well. We miss Nina, but we miss you too because you've been different ever since that event.
Her parents are the nicest people in this movie, by the way.
Maybe to a fault. I don't know.
Maybe to a fault, yeah, because they kind of let her just she just does whatever she wants. There's no real parenting happening. She lives with them. They're really like understanding of her tragedy, but they have almost their own kind of like mini arc. They're kind of they're the most likable characters in the movie, you could argue. But I don't know. I mean, it just feels like she is self-sabotaging in a way, in a similar sense that Nomadland is. And I think that's a little unfortunate. She does some things to, I mean, it's like, again, speaking to a perspective that I don't really necessarily have, but she does things to other women in this movie that are like cruel and maybe unnecessarily cruel, and so, like I said, I don't think she's not as endearing as I think the movie thinks she is.
Well, see, and that was the issue that I had, but they do kind of walk it back, and then we could have an argument about whether or not that's the movie,
right.
Again, walking it back, and because they're too scared to play in that surf
right.
or not. But she does, like, Allison's Brie character doesn't actually get date rape. She just thinks that she did. And, like, so she sets up these elaborate things, and it is you're still affecting that person.
Right.
In the case of Allison Brie's character, it was
revenge. Well, or do we just take her? I mean, we take her word for it. She says that nothing happened.
Yeah, but you presume like she's been able to orchestrate all these other things, that she planned this out accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
At that point, you do have to believe the movie.
Yeah, I suppose. I was like, when that scene happened. By the way, again, the performances are great here, and just the way that I think the Allison Brie scene is a really great example. There's another scene later on, or I think earlier on, with where is it? Anyway, earlier on with like some guy she takes home from the bar, and just these lingering, like, the dialogue's often coming from off screen, and you just the look on their faces as they realize what's happening is like pretty cool. I guess like that, just this ability to kind of like witness in real time people's like catching up with reality at this, I think it's just, you don't see that very often, and I thought the performances were great. And Alison Brie, specifically in that scene at that dinner, is like really good. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't hate this movie. I just don't think it's the movie that it thinks it is, in a lot of ways. Like it's really like, quote unquote, empowering, but I don't think it's as empowering as it wants, or as it thinks it is. You know what I mean? But again, it's hard for me to speak to that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to unpack that. But I think it's certainly empowering. She's, it's not meant to say that, this is every woman's struggle, or this is how one should deal with these things. This is how she dealt with it. And I think herself as a character definitely does feel empowered to do these things.
Right.
And me personally, as an audience member, I was on board. I found her charming enough that I wanted to see her win. What I think that this movie does really well is something that I mentioned earlier. It's unconventional.
Mm-hmm.
It has that bit of a rom-com in it, right? So I can see what you mean.
Yeah,
it seemed kind of like
pick a
distorted.
lane. That's kind of what.
But that's so beautiful when that comes full circle as well, because he was involved.
Yeah.
Right. And so that does have that story arc is capped off.
I get that. But that also feels really convenient for the movie. Like, it's like everything is all intertwined in
they
a
went
very
to school
like.
together.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It does
a great job of setting up of demonstrating how the system is sort of stacked up against women in these situations, right?
Yeah.
You have to recognize that. Even the institution, she goes and talks to the dean, who is herself a woman,
mm-hmm.
also crippled by the bureaucracy of it all, who can't do anything about this alleged rape, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
I don't know. I think that for me personally, I loved it. I would go back to this movie. Out of the Oscar
rewatch,
out of the Best Picture noms, it's like this, Mank, Judas and Black Messiah, and Chicago 7 are like solid.
Like, right. They're in your must-watches?
They're in my collection. Like, I would buy the DVD if that existed anymore.
You could probably still buy a DVD of it.
I'm not gonna. What are you talking
about? Okay, so let's move on to... can you grab the water when you're up there? Let's move on to... Where do we want to go next? I guess Mank is the logical next step. Mank is... directed by David Fincher. He's got kind of like the biggest name from a directorial standpoint here. The synopsis is, in 1930s Hollywood is reevaluated through the eyes of scathing social critique and alcoholic screenwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz as he races to finish the screenplay of Citizen Kane for Orson Welles. This stars Tom Berkey, Lily Collins, it might be just Burke, actually, Joseph Cross, Charles Dance, Monica Grossman, Ferdinand Kingsley, Jamie McShane, Tuppence Middleton, Toby Leonard Moore, Gary Oldman as the titular Mank, Tom Pelfrey, Amanda Seyfried, and Sam Troughton. This is one of those movies that I didn't. This is funny.
No, let's read it out.
Right, this is one of the movies that doesn't technically count, but I found this one when I was searching through my tweets. Watched Mank last night. Gotta say, it's pretty great.
There we go. Okay, there we go, guys. Let's move on. What's next? Sound of Metal? Okay.
Yeah. Mank, it's the one it's the second furthest out from having seen it. And I think this movie is too long, but it is very good. Is kind of like it just like classic like Fincher drama,
mm-hmm.
but like the stakes aren't really that high, which is kind of interesting.
But the characters are interesting enough, and the writing itself is interesting enough. Like, this is a movie definitely written for screenwriters by screenwriters, right? It's absolutely the best scenes in this movie. You talk about Aaron Sorkin and dialogue being action. Like, the most entertaining scenes in this movie are when Mank is sitting around a table with a bunch of other prolific writers, and each are just responding to each other with these classic, like these great one-liners.
Yeah, it's just quips
it's so
after
satisfying.
quips. Yeah, no,
I loved it.
Yeah, no, it is really good, and I think Gary Oldman in this movie is putting on a show. He's playing. So Gary Oldman's quite old at this point. I want to say he's in his 70s, late 70s. The character itself.
Wow, I don't know.
I don't know how old Gary Oldman is here. Let me just double
high.
check. I don't know if he's that old. Gary Oldman age.
Just because it's in his name.
Gary Oldman, 63. Okay, I wasn't quite. He's not in his 70s, but he's 63. The character of Mank at the time of Herman Mankiewicz at the time that they're actually portraying was only like 20 something.
Okay,
but it doesn't really matter. I only found out about that after having watched it. I don't think that really changes too much. It might give you a better sense of how much of an alcoholic he was. If you know what I mean? Like, he's kind of like really kind of like broken as a man by his drinking. Like, he's not well. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Yeah, depends. But he's just so likable. Right,
that's the thing. He's too charismatic. You can't help it.
But also not likable. You can see why people would come off the wrong way, or he might come off the wrong way to some people. Right. He's got strong opinions. He knows how to get them across in sometimes kind of scathing ways,
Yeah.
you know. And he's kind of brutally honest, and it's just basically an exploration of that this is a movie about the writing of another movie, which isn't that exciting again as a concept or really at all. Like not too much really happens in this movie. Again, it's kind of like a slice of life in a lot of ways of kind of during this one period of time. The thing I didn't know was that I guess going into this movie, I didn't know that Citizen Kane was ghostwritten basically for Orson Welles. I don't know a lot about Orson Welles generally, but I know that as time goes on, the more I hear about Orson Welles, like he's not all he was that he said he was. He's kind of was a bit of a charlatan in some ways over his life.
I mean, I think a lot of people were back then.
You just make it what you say you are, like it'll happen for you, kind of thing.
Well,
will it into existence.
Probably like not. I don't want to say the first generation, but the first generation of Hollywood chucksters, probably like
maybe.
And that it's alive and well today. There's plenty of people that are
Sure, yeah. I guess I wouldn't say I'm not gonna go. Let's put it this way: Orson Welles is not a hack, although people have called him a hack.
No, but like. He's just he shouldn't be as well known for his writing as he is. He should be more well known for his performances. Like he's a very performative person.
Right.
He should be well known for the radio shows, War of the Worlds, that revolutionary as well, right? That changed a lot of people's lives, I think.
Well, yeah,
at least at the time.
Yes,
that was unprecedented.
Yeah, it was really he changed the game. Basically, he basically told a meta story for the kind of one of the first times in like a kind of a weird backwards way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's all fine. I don't know, Dan, have you seen Citizen Kane?
This is the problem. We all talked about it. We all kind of committed to watching it, but I don't think did you?
I did not watch it.
So I haven't seen Citizen Kane, unfortunately. I know enough about it. Citizen Kane is one of those movies that I feel has been kind of spoiled for me because it's such a important movie. Like I've heard the Rosebud thing, and I know enough about the movie that twist at the end. I'm avoiding spoilers myself here, but whatever that is, like I know kind of what it symbolizes within the movie.
Right.
So I still definitely need to watch it, but
so I think we did ourselves a disservice by not watching Citizen Kane before watching Mank, because in listening to other people's reviews and kind of getting hearing people's opinions about Mank is that it really colors a lot of the decision making in Mank, and you're like, well, why are we spending time with this, or why are we spending time with that? And it makes more sense if you've seen Citizen Kane. There's direct kind of calls to that. I mean, there's the female lead in Citizen Kane is heavily based on the female lead.
Yeah, I mean, they
movie.
Talk about it within the movie as well, right? Like, they talk about how Citizen Kane is like a loose allegory for what's going on in his life, right? With these people, specifically with Hearst and what was her name? I don't remember Amanda Seyfried's character's name.
I don't remember either. And
it doesn't matter. So that I picked up on that from this movie. I just wasn't aware of the drama from Citizen Kane itself.
Apparently that is in the text of the movie, but what's apparently in the subtext is how much so.
Okay.
And like kind of how much the performance and what we know of the actors who were in Citizen Kane go into the performances of the people in Mank. And try to really draw just kind of a through line from real person to character in Citizen Kane. And so I think that's interesting. And I'm going to have to see it eventually. I think it's also on Netflix.
It is now, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then by the way, this is a Netflix movie. This is from David Fincher. The funny thing about David Fincher is that he will talk shit about anybody and anything, but that does not stop him from doing business with them. So he has definitely talked shit about Netflix before. And he's like, but they let me make my 3-hour black and white movie, so here we are.
Yep.
And that just there's just not a lot of 3-hour black and white films that are really getting a lot of talk these days. I don't know, Dan. Like, you think in this is a really well-made movie. It's very entertaining. The performances are very good. But do you think this is an all-time great movie? And when you think of it like stacking up against the rest of this field, where do you think it kind of stacks up?
Well, no, I mean, it can't be considered like an all-time classic in the same way that Citizen Kane is.
Well, no. I'm not.
Is that what you're asking?
No. I'm saying, does this, in your opinion, is Mank like, hey, we've got these out of these 8 movies, Mank is like up near the top and deserves to be in that conversation? For me, it's like, I think it's really good. I don't know if it's like great movie. And by the way, that's true for some of these other movies we talked about before as well. I think it's just really, really good.
I
don't
don't
think
know.
it passes that.
I would definitely argue that Mank earned its spot in this list.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll always be there for a David Fincher movie.
Yeah, it's the same like with Aaron Sorkin as well. It's the two of them kind of dunking. Like, this is what they do.
Yeah.
Them, kind of, and to a degree, Unleashed, with Netflix kind of being hands off, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, stylistically for David Fincher, this is a little different. He really leans into the kind of aesthetic of the time in like the use of title cards and the way that and the music.
But what it is like I think Mank has a good shot at cinematography, because I have to assume a lot of it is inspired by Citizen Kane.
Yeah,
but it has some more modern like camera angles and camera work.
There's a lot of like still shots. The camera is just placed in a spot and then the thing happens in front of it,
which is how movies were shot back then. But what they're doing with this movie, at least, is they're using more interesting angles when it is still a static angle. So I don't know. I think it's I'd have to watch it again and pay more attention to that, but that's something that I picked up.
Well, if we do watch it again, it'll have to be after having seen Citizen Kane.
Yes, that too.
Okay, so let's talk about. We have 2 movies left. Let's talk about Sound of Metal. I watched this one last night, so this is the most recent in my. For those keeping track at home, this one is the one on my most recently watched. This is directed by Darius Marder. This is a name I'm not familiar with. The synopsis is: a heavy metal drummer's life is thrown into free fall when he begins to lose his hearing. This stars Riz Ahmed, Olivia Cook, Paul Raci, Mathieu Almeric, and Lauren Ridloff. I'm pretty sure I know who Mathieu Almeric is in this movie, but I've never heard that name before. He's clearly the really French guy in this movie. It's like I have to guess. I don't know.
Wasn't he from
I've
Quantum
seen,
of Solace?
Yeah, I've seen him
He's
before.
The bad guy in Quantum of Solace.
Explore Mathieu Almeric is a French actor and filmmaker, best known internationally for his performance as the lead villain in James Bond's film Quantum of Solace.
Best known internationally.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, he's probably in a lot of French movies. It's a French movie about a balloon or something. Okay, so my Twitter review for this. Yeah. This was 3 tweets.
Also for those who are keeping track.
Yeah. Gotta be honest, this movie did not really work for me. It's an interesting idea, but I like the premise more than the execution. It's overly dark, and Riz's performance is nothing to write home about, in my opinion. I didn't really have an emotional connection to the movie either. To be fair, though, it did make being deaf seem terrifying in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's what it was going for, but that was my read. So take that as you will. Ultimately, I don't think it deserves to win Best Picture in a field against Judas and the Black Messiah, Minari, and The Father. I'll fall out of my chair if this movie takes home the prize over any of those movies. And then obviously that makes sense in context as being the last movie out of the list I've seen. But this is an Amazon Studios movie. That's another thing that's interesting. It's another streaming film. It's I didn't like this movie. I didn't like it. I think it's like it's you don't like the term, but I think it's very self-serious. The concept of a rock star, quote unquote, and not even a star, just a metal drummer losing his hearing, I think is a fascinating conceit and concept.
Sure.
This movie takes it so seriously.
Well, it's a serious thing.
I know, but it's like, man, like I just don't. I get it. I know what it's trying for, and it just does not work for me from a stylistic standpoint. And I don't think Riz Ahmed is putting on a very good performance here. I don't really get why people like. I've now seen Riz Ahmed in a few movies, and everyone's always like, yeah, he really did really good. And I'm like, I don't get it. I don't. There's something that Riz Ahmed is doing that it does not work for me. I don't know what it is, but he's not up there in my top favorite actors.
You got a grudge. It's okay. You know what happens?
Anyway, I don't. It's ever since he played the bad guy in Venom. Just kidding. So anyway, that's my kind of take. It was not. It just didn't really strike me that well. Did you like this movie? I don't know.
No, I think I would largely agree. It seems out of the list, this one and the next one we're going to talk about, along with Nomadland, seem like the most Oscar baity in a traditional sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's a a biopic, as it were.
I guess, yeah,
about somebody
a made-up person in this case.
Yeah, but these musical ones tend to do well at the Oscars. I like the idea as well. I don't have as much of an issue with the performances as you did.
I didn't love it.
The one thing that I rented it on YouTube.
Mm.
That's the format in which I watched it, and they didn't have closed captioning.
What?
This movie isn't. It's impossible. I feel like I had half an experience because like there's long extended scenes where there's no closed captioning.
Yeah. So was there no closed captioning at all at any point?
I turn on the YouTube like the one where like predictive closed captioning and it's still
that is crazy because so I watched it. There is closed captioning about 3/4 of the way through when they start like when he understands signing, like once he learns signing, then when they start signing to each other, you get closed captioning.
Did, and then it dropped out again.
But I think it's on purpose. I think what they're showing you is that like, hey, look at how by not being able to hear anymore, he's not able to communicate. He can't he's now separated himself from the world. I think that's on purpose.
If it's deliberate, then genius. Honestly, genius because it
frustrated you. You felt frustrated.
It makes the movie inaccessible, right? It's very isolating and.
I think they're going. I don't know for sure, but that was my read. That was an intentional choice.
Interesting. Definitely puts the audience like it makes it much more visceral. You're in the character's shoes, but it makes it a little bit more difficult to tell the story as much as you're making people feel the story, right?
Well,
because they are communicating, and if you don't pick it up,
yeah, I mean that's true. But you're supposed to be you're placed in Riz Ahmed's shoes, and he is extremely stubborn. He doesn't want to. Like come to terms with his situation, right? In a lot of ways, he's like, and because of that stubbornness, he doesn't really understand what's going on or care to for a while. And I think that's what you're supposed to kind of feel at that time, which is just like is isolation and kind of like this movie is frustrating, and I think it wants to be in some ways, but maybe overly so.
Maybe.
And again, like I said, it makes being deaf seem absolutely terrifying, and I don't know if the movie's trying to send that because like if that's the message, I feel like it's a little muddied because I mean there's this like really strong community of deaf people that like really try like I think for me the part of the movie where he's kind of like willing to give it a chance is the best part of the movie. I think maybe most traditional. But I think the other characters in that part of the movie are more interesting than him, and more fascinating. I would love to have spent more time with those kids or that school teacher. But instead, you get this Riz Ahmed character who's just angry at the world, and I mean, sure, they kind of lean into this addict kind of side of him. But I think they might lean a little too hard. This idea that he's addicted to hearing is a concept in this movie. They treat this idea of how when he sells all this stuff to get his hearing back.
Yeah.
They play that as a bad thing, and the movie presents it as that's not this community. That's not what we're about. But also, you're hurting yourself. But I don't think that it really goes far enough into that idea. It just kind of does all the typical trappings and says, "Oh, look, I sold the thing. I want to buy it back. I need to borrow money." Just like it seems very surface level on that.
Yeah,
that side.
They don't explore enough of his original addiction to justify that, right? It's just he's showing up at this place and they're saying these things.
Well, he says, "I am an addict." Like it's like, okay, show don't tell, but it's just telling me. I'm like, okay, if you say so.
Yeah.
Largely,
I mean, largely forgettable. I don't know how much that has to do with that isolation with not being with it being deliberately incoherent. It sounds like, but.
I'll tell you what, though. There's two movies that I had, like, I didn't know really anything about these movies before going into them. Just basically, I've tried to stay as spoiler-free as possible on that stuff. And that's not true for most movies I watch. I like watching trailers and stuff. But I don't do that for Oscars movies because it's like a rare chance for me to really kind of like go into a movie completely unspoiled.
And they're not typically the type of movies that we talk about on the podcast, so we don't review them ahead of time or anything like that.
Exactly. So Sound of Metal was when I was like, I kind of turned on for the first couple minutes, and I heard that metal music. I was like, oh, sick! I want to listen to this. Like, I want to watch this movie with like really good sound.
Yeah.
And boy, was I wrong, because there's like no. It's pretty quiet most of the movie, intentionally so. But I did like the effect that they use for like the deafness, kind of this like really low hum kind of, and like detail kind of really stripped away. When he's first going deaf, I think it's really scary, and I think on purpose,
sure,
and effective.
Can't imagine.
About he's kind of like trying to like pop his ears, different kind of stuff. He's like, what's going on? So I like that, but I don't know. Just as a whole, it's only okay. And then the girlfriend character isn't really in the movie that much, and it's not really explored. It's not really explored as a character, really. You meet her dad for about 2 minutes. He says he didn't like him but now he does.
Mm-hmm.
And
Just,
that's it.
It's one of those. A lot of movies are like this nowadays. I don't know. I haven't done enough research or thought about it enough to make a dissertation about it. But it kind of seems like a lot of the storytelling is implied in favor of being actually shown to you, right? It's the implication of something having happened a while back and them dealing with the fallout of it now. But it's just people talking about it.
Right, and that same thing with Promising Young Woman. By the way, it's another movie that I completely misjudged by going into it. I'm like, oh, this looks like a fun movie. Yeah. And it was it's certainly, I guess, fun in a sense, but not the way that I was expecting. So, but yeah, like a lot of these movies are dealing with like the fallout of, in some cases, events that are only known to the characters in the movie, or in some cases, like maybe it's like an event that is like a historical event, but as the audience, maybe you don't have enough context or understanding of what that historical event is to get everything out of it. I think, by the way, another example of that loosely is Mank. If you hadn't seen Citizen Kane or understand the importance of Citizen Kane, you might not grasp the full what this movie is really trying to do, right? Which I don't like having to do homework for movies. I'm not a fan of that.
I agree.
Okay.
But at the same time, some of these stories, it's like, how do you tell them? You can't tell the story of Chicago 7, right?
I agree, because you don't have time to tell the story and explore
Judas and the Black
characters.
Messiah. Like that one, you are exploring some of the main characters, but you don't have enough time to really get into all the context, right?
Yeah. But as long as they do a good enough job of giving me the basics, right? And then if I can fill in the blanks, then I'll do that. Okay. So last one, you didn't seem to like The Father based on what your comments were, but.
Oh no, quite the opposite.
Okay. Because I think this movie's brilliant. I really like this movie. So this is a Sony Pictures Classics line. I guess that's their kind of like Searchlight, whatever. This is directed by Florian Zeller. This is also not a name I'm familiar with, but apparently this is an adaptation of a stage play, also written by Florian Zeller. And
awesome.
So that's interesting. It's kind of cool when that they can kind of bridge that gap. So the synopsis is: a man refuses all assistance from his daughter as he ages. As he tries to make sense of his changing circumstances, he begins to doubt his loved ones, his own mind, and even the fabric of his reality. This stars Olivia Colman, Mark Gatiss, Anthony Hopkins, Imogen Poots, Rufus Sewell, and Olivia Williams. Here's my Twitter review.
Mm-hmm.
This spiritual successor to Memento is haunting. I don't know if this is a realistic take on a degenerative brain disease, because I have no context for it. But I can tell you that if it is like this, then it's absolutely terrifying and tragic. In so many ways, this plays like a horror film, and with Hopkins' own history in horror, it seems fitting. There are points where I feel as paranoid as Anthony does. By the way, I think it's interesting that his character is also named Anthony, or Antony. You can't make heads or tails of it all at times, and as a seemingly intentional choice, I can't fault it for that. I would rather not ever see this movie again. I feel as though by doing so would be to reveal a greater truth about the context that escapes the main character. And when this movie is asking you to feel his experiences, to put yourself in his shoes, to have more knowledge would fundamentally lessen the experience. So this is one of these ones where, like, I think a single watch without providing you context to it. By the way, if you haven't seen this movie,
stop now.
Don't listen to our review of this. Honestly, you're better off not knowing anything and just going into it.
Certainly.
It's only an hour and a half. It's a really kind of I wouldn't say it's a quick movie in the sense that it doesn't use up a lot of your time, but I think it's really well paced. And anyway, but that last kind of comment there was just like, I think there's certain movies and there's certain experiences that I think are best served by only doing them one time, and that to do them to experience them again completely or in some ways fundamentally changes the experience. And I think to watch this movie again might do that.
No, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I agree that you'll never replace the first time having watched this movie.
Yeah,
it's one you do want to go in fresh, and you want to just pay attention. That being said, I'm a big proponent of rewatches in all cases, and it's not about replacing the original experience. It's about having a new one, right? So it doesn't remove anything from that original experience. But what I would like to do, because I do want to rewatch this movie, I would like to go through it again and try to keep track of the more linear timeline, right? Because the movie is really all from his perspective, and it jumps all over the place because he's remembering things from years ago.
I don't even know if there's a way to do it.
Different decades, but my suspicion is that the entire day is one consecutive day of his life. Like if you were to draw it out as a comic book, but his mind is jumping all over the place.
No,
so he's having these conversations.
It's longer than that. There's multiple venues. I mean, yeah, I suppose. I mean, you could argue that he's been in that home, I guess, the entire time.
Right. Like it's about the day in his life, which is where we catch up to him, right?
Right.
At the very end.
Yeah.
That's the day that he's been having. Those are the memories that he's been having that entire day.
I didn't read it that way. I think
I don't know. I would have to rewatch it to again think more deeply about it. But that
makes more sense. That does make more sense than my reading, which was that it was like more of a kind of stylistic journey that it didn't necessarily have to make sense.
Regardless of whether or not it is consecutive like that, it still is a great way to look at dementia and potentially Alzheimer's.
Oh man,
I'm not sure what he's diagnosed with here.
It's so crazy. I mean, they don't talk about it. I mean, it could be any of those things. But like, I think, by the way, we just quickly say Anthony Hopkins, I think, puts on a very good performance here. Anthony Hopkins is certainly old, but he's not this old, and he's playing above his age, like older than he is, I think, in this role. And his ability to go from completely quick and witty to not understanding the entire context of the room he's in is brilliant work. Does he deserve to win Best Actor? I don't know. We'll have to look at the field. But
that's coming up next.
Yeah, but I just think that it's just hard to ignore what a great performance it is here. Anthony Hopkins, of course, it's a good performance, but it has to be said, I think.
Yeah, no, because he runs the gamut. Because he is formidable in this role at certain points, and then also blubbering like a baby in certain points. Yeah. He really does, again, that range thing. He's showing the ultimate amount of range, I would imagine.
He literally plays a child, embodies a child for a moment.
It's a really cool, just a cool way, much like Sound of Metal. It's trying to put the audience into that character's shoes.
But what a brilliant, but like. I remember I was watching this movie. I'm like, this is fucking brilliant. I was like, what an amazing way to put you in the shoes of somebody who has Alzheimer's, because like the way that they would have different, like the same character played by different people throughout the movie in some cases is like, and I'm like, now I'm thinking like, wait, did I miss something? Get it? Because like I start feeling like paranoid about the movie. I'm like, there's parts where I'm like, is something like. Is there like a sci-fi twist to this movie coming that he is like someone is actually pulling fucking with him?
Right.
And I was like, holy shit! If that's coming, that's crazy. Even if it doesn't come, that's still crazy.
And that's what's scary about it. Like when you talk about things like dementia, like put yourself in that person's shoes. They genuinely would have that same conversation and would not have any way to realistically tell the difference.
No,
that kind of stuff is the most peak terrifying.
So there's another theme across these movies. I don't recall if we mentioned this, but like old age is a theme in a couple of some of these movies, and I think it might be that part of that is like this is an exploration of this concept by filmmakers who are now dealing with either parents these weren't themes that you would often explore in Hollywood. Like you go to make a movie and talking about dementia or making a movie about dementia is going to be a hard sell, so you got kind of a different type of Hollywood where you've got these kind of like the giant blockbuster AAA stuff that's all been moved out to next year because it has to come out in a theater, otherwise it's not going to make money. And then you have movies like this that are very small, low budget, basically filmed in one room, and you can tell these kind of more intimate stories, and that's always kind of been the case, but I just think it's fascinating that you have this group of filmmakers, or I guess in this case it's a filmmaker and a playwright, exploring this conceit, because all these movies that deal with old age seem to come from, or at least feel like, whether intentionally or not, come from a place of like, this is something that's happening to these people. Like they've experienced these types of things. Yeah,
that would make sense, right?
Like my mom had a stroke, and that's like for Minari, or my father has dementia, and I want to explore but it's different because it's not, these movies aren't always being played from the perspective of the parent here or the son.
You get some of the perspective.
You get some of it, but it's trying to put you in the shoes of the person who's going through it, which I think is really cool and different. I think it's a really amazing movie. I really like nothing happens really, but who cares, because it's making you experience something new. We talk about this all the time, or at least I do, the idea that movies are just empathy machines.
Sure.
They're designed to make you feel things that you wouldn't normally experience, and this is helping you, or as asking you to experience what having dementia might feel like, and it's really quite scary.
It really is.
Yeah. So, for my money, one of my favorites of this whole list.
I would agree with that. Also, another one of the surprises that just came out of left field. I wasn't sure what to expect. And again, referencing the top of the show, like with a title like The Father, I was expecting it to be a very conventional, just a story about a dad who's, reticent and a daughter who wants whatever. They have competing sort of interests, and like it just seemed like a very like boring, classic Oscar baity movie, and that's not at all the case.
No.
Very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. So, what did you make of the I guess husband role in this movie? Like he's in that played by I think, is it 2 or 3 different actors?
It's played by 2, but the character is 3 different people.
Right.
Because he's conflating 3 different people. One of which is the doctor. One of which is her current love affair. One of which is a previous one.
Right.
So he's conflating their names and then also their identities at certain points.
Paul and
I think David or something. Or James.
But I thought that was like. The way that the one specific scene around the dinner table and after when he kind of like confronts him about quote unquote like ruining his daughter's life is like very intense. I just like it's fucking crazy, man.
It's a serious issue. I mean, senior abuse is a genuine issue in like nursing homes and private residences, and like it's uncomfortable to watch. This movie is very uncomfortable to watch, emotionally challenging. I've had family members that have gone through similar experience, like not that, but like just dementia and stuff like that.
Just
so it's just like it was very effective in that sense. Anthony Hopkins is playing the role to the best of his abilities, and it's working, and it's kind of again terrifying to look at.
You don't know what the right answer is either, right? You see, because when you see him when he is lucid, right? He is capable of basically doing anything, right?
Yeah.
And but when he's not, he's just so vulnerable.
It's so challenging because, like, as a society, we would definitely value independence. We value autonomy, and self-determination, right?
Yep.
You don't want to take those things away from people, but at the same time, if someone becomes a danger to themselves, how do you make a decision for them?
Yeah.
Like the whole concept of power of attorney, it's also mind-boggling that whole surf again to play around in, but.
I mean, and that's the movie
works.
I think it's the thing. I don't think I don't think it does not explore all of the angles that this can open up, but it's not trying to, and it really kind of settles into this one kind of milieu of just his experience going through it, and I think it's totally fine. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie.
Right.
What did you make of the moment where like he's being choked to death? Quote unquote.
Yeah.
This movie's non-linear. Is that the last moment? Because what's interesting is that I guess it's not entirely from his perspective because there's moments that are not.
that was a fantasy. That was her fantasy. That wasn't something that happened in real life.
Who knows?
I think it is. I think that's because the dark
movie
thing
does not
about
give you an answer to that.
The challenging thing about it is in similar situations, you kind of at some points have those impulses.
Sure.
It would like, and it's a dark thought, but sometimes you have a thought of we would be better off if this was over.
Right.
And I think that's what they're expressing with that scene. It's something that everybody who's had that thought is ashamed of, but it's still a natural thought to appear.
I'm not even necessarily like attacking the characters' motivations or any of that or questioning them. I am just curious that scene is very quick. It doesn't have. It's right in it's in the middle of the movie, and it's like I don't know really what. I think it's the most kind of confusing element of the entire movie.
You're right, actually. It's a good point because that's the only example of anything from her perspective. The rest of the entire movie is him.
Basically, yeah.
I still don't believe that it really happened. I still believe it is from her perspective.
I don't know. That's a big question mark. You could probably write a whole thesis on that one moment in this movie, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know. That's neither here nor there. The Father's a brilliant movie. I hope that you were listening to this after having seen it.
Yes.
But if not, go into it and watch it anyway. It's just so cool how they're able to put you in those shoes. You just don't see like that. You don't see movies like that very often. I don't know.
Yeah.
Impressed. Despite the fact that The Sound of Metal tries to do the same thing and didn't really work for me. I don't know. Didn't have Anthony Hopkins in the lead role. Maybe if it was an Anthony Hopkins.
It also didn't have sound for half the movie, so
right.
That really contributes to the experience.
Well, half, someone might say, more than half. Okay, let's get into our predictions for the Oscars. So we don't do all the categories because there's too many, and we don't have
and we don't
knowledge.
watch all the movies either. So.
Right. So let's start with, I guess. We should start with Best Picture. So we just talked about them all. Let's start with Best Picture.
Best Picture.
So we're doing Best Picture, Dan. Your pick for who you want to win.
Who I want to win Best Picture. I think I want to win. I want Judas and the Black Messiah to win.
Okay.
But that's purely based on how that was the most entertaining movie that I watched. Just for my personal taste. What I think the Academy is going to choose. I feel like I'm going to say Minari.
You think it's going to be Minari?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good pick. I was also thinking that. So my pick for... Okay, I hate when I have to do this. I always get distracted by my own typing. Okay, my pick for who I want to win Best Picture. I would love for The Father to win because it's doing something completely new, in my opinion. Do I think it'll win? Maybe, actually. I might pick it for both.
Okay.
I'm gonna pick it. I'm gonna pick it for both. Okay. I'm gonna pick it for both. I'm just gonna go out there on a limb. It really doesn't help your points because if
going out on a limb,
it doesn't really. Well, I mean, it can double you, or you can completely fall on your face. So I'm gonna go with The Father. Just I don't know, just so much. I have a real soft spot for Minari though, but because you picked it already, I'm gonna go with The Father. Okay, let's get into the other categories here. So, Best Director, we have Thomas Vinterberg for Another Round, haven't seen it. David Fincher for Mank, Lee Isaac Chung for Minari, Chloe Zhao for Nomadland, and Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman. Dan, who do you want to win?
Emerald Fennell is who I want to win for Best Director. Actually, no, sorry. David Fincher for Mank.
Okay.
I like that movie well enough, but Mank is a better director.
Okay. Yep.
And then who I think is going to win, I'm going to say Chloe Zhao for Nomadland. Seems like an Oscar choice.
Yeah. Yeah. You think? Yeah. I think that's fair, but I don't.
Man, I'm playing the odds in that category.
Yeah. That makes sense. So you think Nomadland? Okay. So for me, who do I want to win? I would love if Lee Isaac Chung from Minari could take it home. Like I said, when I mentioned before, every scene doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. So I think it's really challenging to do. So I'm gonna put him down for my pick for who I want to win, which is Minari. And for who I think is going to win, I think that what are the chances that David Fincher actually wins Best Director?
I mean, it is a movie about Hollywood, made for Hollywood, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm almost certain that movie's going to take home the best screenplay.
Yeah, I don't think he's not really doing anything that interesting from a directorial standpoint here. I don't. All right, but he's David Fincher, so I'm going to put David Fincher. Fincher for me. Okay, so who do we want to win for Best Actor in a Leading Role? We have Riz Ahmed, Sound of Metal, Chadwick Boseman, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, posthumously, Anthony Hopkins, The Father, Gary Oldman for Mank, and Stephen Yeun for Minari. Stephen Yeun, I think? Yeah. Okay, who do you want to win here, Dan?
I want Anthony Hopkins for The Father. Okay. I'm actually very surprised that movie didn't get a nomination for Best Director.
Yeah,
I think the way the movie is constructed, that would have been my choice had it been in there.
Yeah.
But Anthony Hopkins for The Father, I could see Gary Oldman winning. That is, like, in terms of acting capability, he is putting on a show. He's putting a lot of work into that role. That would make it 2 years in a row, though, right? Was Darkest Hour last year?
No, I believe that was the year before, wasn't it?
Who won Best Actor? Anyways, we'll find out later.
That's a good question.
So I can see Gary Oldman.
So you think Gary Oldman is going to win? Okay, Gary Oldman. So I don't think it's going to be Riz Ahmed is my pick. I think it's who do I want to win? I wish I'd seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I haven't. I can't speak to Chadwick Boseman's performance. I heard it's very good. I like Stephen Yeun's performance in Minari, but I don't think it's best actor quality.
It's not enough, right? Like he's not, because that story is so much about the family and the other characters. He doesn't get enough screen time to validate that.
I think I'm gonna. Yeah, I mean, is Anthony Hopkins a basic choice? Yes, it is. But is it the right choice? I think it is also. And then who will win? I'm also gonna double down here. I'm gonna say Anthony Hopkins as well.
Man, the naming conventions are all over the place.
I'm all over here. I know. Sometimes I'm naming it after the movie. Sometimes I'm naming it after.
I wish you guys could see what's being written down here.
Yeah, this is for later, so I can come back and figure out who won.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, I'm really doing myself service.
It does technically make sense, but it's.
Yeah, no, because I could have written the father here 3 times, but instead I wrote the father, Anthony Hopkins, and then the father again. Yeah, well, whatever. And then Gary Oldman instead of Mank, which would have been less letters. Okay, best actress in a leading role. We have Viola Davis from Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I always like Viola Davis. Mm-hmm. Andra Day, The United States versus Billie Holiday. I haven't seen that movie either. This always happens to me. This happens to us every year, and it's like
it's kind of embarrassing at this point. It happens every year, and we don't do anything about it. Right?
But like, I don't know if it's us that needs to do something about it. But like, how is it that all the best actor categories are all from movies in the best picture category? Right?
Sure.
Those are all performances from best picture movies, but all the best actress
not
are
necessarily
really not from those movies.
2 of them are.
Yeah, 2 of 5.
2 of 5. I don't know.
Yeah. So. Vanessa Kirby, Pieces of a Woman, Frances McDormand, Nomadland, and Carey Mulligan, Promising Young Woman. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Frances McDormand here is probably going to win Best Actress. Okay. I don't think that. By the way, I don't think that's going out on a limb.
Yeah, it's a safe bet.
What happened? Oh no, my where'd it go?
You exited it.
How? Okay, I'll come back. It's right here.
You want her to win, or you think she's going to win?
I think she's going to win. Do I want her to win? Different. That's a whole different category. That's a whole different question. I don't know yet.
That's the second of the 2 questions.
Yeah. So you think about. What do you? Okay. I'm
going Carey Mulligan all the way.
You think Carey Mulligan on both?
For my want. I don't think that she's going to win, but I really did find her performance to be very charming. I was all about that character.
Okay.
Despite her, violent tendencies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was a lot of fun, and despite the fact that Bo Burnham's character turned out to have been involved in everything, the short little rom-com period that they had together it worked.
Okay, so we are going with
Carey Mulligan.
It's easier to write that than Promising Young Woman. Carey, I hate.
Is it easier?
I don't know. I have to type around my microphone.
That's good enough. We'll know.
Carey M. We'll put it. And that's okay. And then that's from you. So I want. Who do I want to win? I'm gonna go for both. Actually, I'm gonna double up on Frances M. And then for Will, you're also doubling up. You're going
No, I'm going to go with Viola Davis for Will. Okay. Even though I haven't seen the movie, that's just a sure bet.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. And then I am going to go with Frances McDormand again. By the way, if you're using any of our picks to help you make your picks for like a pool or anything, we didn't do a group pool this year.
Right.
We put on a much bigger show last year for the Oscars. It just doesn't feel right with the way things are set up right now. But if you're using these picks to help you make decisions, don't. We have no idea what we're talking about here.
I think most listeners could have picked up on that.
Fair enough. Okay, so best actor in a supporting role. This is always a big category. Mm-hmm. Often means it used to mean big things potentially for the actors. So Sacha Baron Cohen, The Trial of Chicago 7. Daniel Kaluuya, Judas and the Black Messiah. Leslie Odom Jr., One Night in Miami. Paul Raci, Sound of Metal. Lakeith Stanfield, Judas and the Black Messiah. Dan, where are you going here?
I want Daniel Kaluuya.
Okay.
That role. I mean, he was definitely. It was written well for him.
Yeah.
He was given a bunch of monologues and speeches and stuff, but he killed it. I think I'll take that in both categories. Actually.
You stole my pick.
I don't know. Part of me wants to see Paul Raci for Sound of Metal. He was the kind of the older deaf guy, right?
Right. He's good.
He's pretty good, and I mean that is such an interesting role. So it's a different type of acting. It's just hard to qualify it, I guess.
Yeah, and also to be fair, is Daniel Kaluuya really a supporting actor?
Well, yeah, it's hard to. Well, that movie
You know?
is a group of supporting actors, right?
Yeah. So I mean, then there's
two of which are nominated.
they're
here.
stacking. This is a move that, by the way, certain studios will do, where they'll, because you can choose what you want to get who they're nominated for, which categories. It's not quite as flexible as the some other award shows, but yeah, they chose to not have Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield both nominated for Best Supporting Actor, instead of having Daniel Kaluuya or the other way around as leading actor. Yeah. So they've kind of stacked the field here. I want Daniel Kaluuya to win, and you think he's also going to win. Daniel K. Dan. This is so annoying. I hate it. And then for me, I want him to win, like I said. Dan K. And then I would. Who will win? If it's Sacha Baron Cohen, I swear. No. Who do I think is actually going to win? I've never seen One Night in Miami.
It's pretty good. Actually, I think that movie's underrepresented here.
Oh, really? Okay. You think they got snubbed? What you're saying?
A little bit. I mean, Regina
I'm
King
going
directorial debut. I'm not sure if necessarily the movie qualified for best director, but I think, I don't know, I would have liked to see some of the other characters or actors nominated.
Okay, fair enough. Best actress in a supporting role. We have Maria Bakalova from Borat subsequent movie film. Glenn Close, Hillbilly Elegy. Oh man, this movie got eviscerated online.
Did it?
Yeah, absolutely. Olivia Colman, The Father. Amanda Seyfried, Mank. Young Jun Yoon from Minari. Who does she play in Minari?
I think that's the grandmother.
If it is the grandmother, she's very good.
Yeah.
Where's Explore? Explore this. Who does she play in? Yeah, yes, she's the grandmother. Okay. So, Dan, who do you want?
Then I'll take Minari in both categories for that.
You think? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Amanda Seyfried has a good shot. I haven't seen Hillbilly LG, and Glenn Close also.
I was like, that's like
odds-on favorite usually,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm gonna take Minari in both categories.
Okay, Minari in both. Dan, you really don't give me a lot of. You don't help me out here when you just.
When I don't vamp.
When you
as
don't
much.
vamp as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could, what about that performance stands out to you?
The grandmother. She was probably almost the emotional core of that cast. As much as Stephen Yeun is arguably the main character, he's so busy doing other stuff half the time that he doesn't get as much screen time. He just is on his mission, and the family is picking up the pieces. So I think that she had more. Her character was explored more. Like she was developed more.
Okay. So here's the thing: this Maria Bakalova performance in Borat's subsequent movie film is apparently like absolutely crazy. Like, not that her performance necessarily, but like her inclusion and everything that she like happens to her and with her in this movie is apparently insane.
Okay.
So, but that being said, not the kind of insane that I think is rewarded at the Oscars. She's an unknown actress, basically. They did a whole search to find her because Sacha Baron Cohen is too well known now. So how do you fix that? Okay, so you bring in someone you don't know. That's the daughter character, Maria Bakalova.
Gotcha.
So that's really interesting. I want that to be rewarded, so I'm going to put that here. Do I think that's a realistic? Do I think I'm going to win here? Absolutely not. You want Minari for both. I think, is she going to win against Glenn Close is the question. I hope so. So let's put Minari here.
I really wouldn't discount Amanda Seyfried and Mank because Hollywood will favor that movie. I'm guaranteeing that, right?
Yeah.
That's a role that they're all kind of familiar with and kind of idolize. So I feel like that it's playing into the Academy's hands.
Right.
So I wouldn't discount it. Is all I'm
I
saying.
think they're playing into their hands like it's like they're like the villains.
Screenplay 100% is going to Mank.
You think so?
Original screenplay.
Best
right?
adapted screenplay is the first one. So best adapted screenplay: Borat subsequent movie film, screenplay by Sacha Baron Cohen, Anthony Hines, Dan Swiner, Peter Bain. There's like a long line of people here. Story by Sacha Baron Cohen and others. The Father: Christopher Hampton and Florian Zeller. Nomadland: Chloe Zhao. One Night in Miami: Kemp Powers, and The White Tiger: Ramin
Bahraini.
Anyway, so this is tough. I feel like best adapted screenplay. So probably The Father. I feel like but that's almost too easy because it's coming from like a play by the same name.
Well, they're all adaptations, right? That's the whole point of that category.
But you can adapt adapted screenplay is pretty flexible.
Sure.
The story just has to exist, and then you adapt it. Adapting The Father, I feel like awarding an adapted screenplay to The Father, I don't think is really fair because it's really not that big of a leap from a play script to a screenplay. I don't know enough, and I'm probably doing a disservice to people, to like writers when I say that.
Yeah.
But it's not written, even though it's adapted, quote unquote. It's not coming whole cloth. You know, a lot of it's probably pulled directly. Again, I don't know the background here. That's kind of the sense I'm getting. That being said, something like Nomadland, which is like we take the concept of this like nomad, these people, right?
Yeah.
These nomadic people, and then you make a story around it. Is more, I feel like, more challenging of a. That being said, I don't know if they 100% succeeded.
That's not what adapted screenplay means. Adapted screenplay means it's literally adapted from another work.
Right?
So Nomadland, I'm assuming a book about it, right?
I don't know if it's. I don't think. We should just.
Regardless, what I'll say is I want One Night in Miami to win this. Having mentioned before that it's slightly underrepresented. One Night in Miami is a really cool
previously established material.
Yeah. So it's a story about Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown, and it's almost like a bottle episode. They're all the entire movie takes place inside the hotel, essentially a hotel room.
Yeah.
And they go out of their way a little bit, but more or less it takes place in this hotel room after Muhammad Ali, well at that time Cassius Clay, won a fight against Sonny Liston. But a really cool exploration of the civil rights. Obviously, it was at the same time as some of the other stuff that's going on, or other movies that are nominated here, I should say.
Do you want this for both categories, you said?
No, I'm saying I want it.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to win, but I want it, and I want more people to watch it, too. That's
Okay. Yeah, so you got to pump its tires. That makes sense.
A little bit.
That makes sense. So who do you think will win?
I think it's going to go to Nomadland. I just have a feeling that movie is going to get a lot of Oscar love. Not my personal preference.
Why?
But it's going to. I just can see it happening.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's already getting a lot of Oscar
White Tiger, I really regret not having watched. It's been on my list. I just didn't make time for it. It seems like a really cool story, but I have, again,
well, you can still a chance to watch it before the Oscars.
Yeah.
So what do I think is going to win? Let's start there. I haven't seen enough of these to really know. There's so many people involved in this one that I would just love to see them all win.
In Borat?
Yeah, so let's put that. That's just like a vote for chaos.
Yeah.
Is really what I'm going to do that. I want Borat to win. Who do I think is going to win? I'll put The Father, just to be a little bit different. Okay. And for Best Original Screenplay, Judas and the Black Messiah screenplay.
Shit, Meg's not nominated. God damn it.
Judas and the Black Messiah, screenplay by Will Burson, Shaka King, story by Will Burson, Shaka King, Kenny Lucas, and Keith Lucas. Minari, Lee Isaac Chung, Promising Young Woman, Emerald Fennell, Sound of Metal, screenplay by Darius Martyr, Abraham Martyr, story by Darius Martyr and Derek Cian France. Okay.
And Trial of Chicago 7's there.
Oh shit, I missed that one. It was under the fold. Trial of Chicago 7, Aaron Sorkin. Who do you think is going to win? Or who do you want to win? Either one.
I want to see Promising Young Woman win. I think that movie was kind of a breath of fresh air for me, and I just want to see it, take home a few prizes.
Okay, so you want that one to win.
Yeah.
Saying. Okay.
The most original out of those Oscar movies that I watched, that was the most surprising, and I think that's
right.
A symptom of it being so original.
Yeah. Okay. Promising Young Woman for Dan. And then who do you think will win?
I can see this going to Sound of Metal.
Sound of Metal,
because it's such a audacious, like going into it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a cool concept.
And took a lot of work to pull it off. If they did that sound stuff deliberately, again, I would applaud them for that because it really worked.
Yeah. As
much as it's frustrating on the audience, it was effective in that sense.
Right.
So.
If that's what they're going for,
yeah.
It works. As an original screenplay, Judas and Black Messiah is pretty good.
It is.
So I'm gonna put that down for will win. Judas and the Black Messiah. Who do I? You know what? No, I'm actually going to go the other way. I want Judas the Black Messiah to win, and I bet you Trial Chicago 7 will win. Just because I'm a cynical bastard. I think the lesser film dealing with the same concept will probably win than the screenplay. Okay, best original score. Now, nothing on this list. We like to do this every. I like to, and at least do this every year because there's typically at least a couple good like scores out there that I think are memorable or in some way interesting. Not a lot of them this year. So the Five Bloods, Terrence Blanchard, Mank, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross. They actually appear twice. Minari, Emily Mosseri, News of the World, James Newton Howard, and Soul, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, Jean Baptiste. So I think it's really easy to say Soul should win here, at least for me. I think I really, really, really like what Trent Reznor and them are doing here, especially maybe more the kind of like otherworldly stuff. And I do like the jazz. That's why, actually, by the way, I think that's where Jean Baptiste comes in. He's not really he's more the jazz guy. On Mank, again, sticking with the kind of like the big names, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, these, from Nine Inch Nails, not the type of score you'd imagine from them. There's very like classical Hollywood score in Mank, and it's like really outside the box for what Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross are used to. So I think that's like they did something bold there. So and I'm like willing to give them credit for it. But I don't know if it's enough to necessarily win here. I don't know. What do you think of this category here?
Soul, you're right, is the easiest because it's the most musical, right? Like,
yeah.
I didn't pay close enough attention to the music in any of them. Like, I don't think the music stuck out to me in any of them as being particularly impactful.
Right.
So, honestly, my choices in this category are going to be a toss-up. I'll throw Mank in there for both, just because that's the movie I like the most out of the ones that are featured.
Right.
I think.
Right. Okay. So Mank it is for both. So for me, this is really challenging. I want Soul to win. I not a perfect movie, but I liked the music in it. So I think hey, fair enough. I haven't seen News of the World, and I haven't seen, that's the only one on this I haven't seen. The Five Bloods score doesn't stand out to me. It's been a while since I watched it, but it doesn't stand out as being particularly memorable. I don't think Manx is good enough. I'm going to put Soul for both. So we got a lot of Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross representation here.
They're big lately.
Yeah. Fair enough. You haven't seen their best You haven't even seen their best work in The Social Network. Best cinematography. This is the last category we'll do. Judas and the Black Messiah, Sean Bobbitt. Mank, Eric Messerschmidt. I haven't heard that word, the name Messerschmidt, in a long time. Like, I feel like World War II movies is like the last time I've heard it.
Makes sense.
News of the World, Darius Wolski. Nomadland, Joshua James Richards, and Trial Chicago 7, Fedin Papa Michael. It's one name, Papa Michael. Okay, Dan, best cinematography. Where do you come down?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going with. I feel like Nomadland is just going to win, and I can't decide why. Like, it has a lot of really cool,
right,
really effective landscape shots, right?
Mm-hmm. Lots of desert,
lots of wide open spaces, mountains, and just natural beauty. So it does that well. I can see them rewarding that.
So you think that Nomadland will win, but you don't want it to?
I don't want it to win. What I want to win is Mank for this category.
Okay.
Having mentioned before, like the way that they kind of blend the old school cinematography style with contemporary style. I think it's still interesting while being black and white and having some of those more static camera angles. So I think that's a good combination.
So I'm going to go with Mank for both because I think it's, although not necessarily doing anything super new, because it's so classic and old, that makes it new again and interesting again. I don't think that anything that they're doing from a cinematography standpoint for Trial Chicago 7 is really anything to write home about. Nomadland is good, I would argue, but I don't like the desert, so I'm not going to nominate for that. I haven't seen News of the World, and Judas and the Black Messiah could pull it out, but I just think Mank is doing something for this category specifically.
Yeah. Judas
more
and Black
interesting.
Messiah is a great movie, but its cinematography specifically doesn't stand out the way that it does in these others.
Yeah, there's some couple interesting shots. I think about early on, like there's like a robbery scene early on. I think it's really well done. But it's just Mank I think is just doing something on for this specific category more interesting. Okay, that is our list. We will touch on this next week on who came out on top in terms of best taste versus best predictor, best prognosticator. And I generally do poorly in these selections. So I guess we will see who shall come out on top. I didn't really do any research this time about like who's kind of like leading in any that not necessarily matters, but I have only one I knew about was Nomadland was getting a lot of buzz. So
Gotcha.
Okay, well that does it. You can find us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast, and head over to our website towerofbabble.ca to find everything that we do. We'll be back next week with more TOB. I look forward to discussing the finale of not Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Sorry, Captain America is kind of like a major element.
It's a Captain America story.
Yeah.
It's just not cool.
So we'll talk about that among other things. Where there's some plans to get some guests on the show over the next few weeks, which we haven't done in a long time. So stay tuned for that. Best way to keep up with all the details is our Twitter account. So follow us there. And if you want to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/Tower Babblecast and help keep the lights on. Either way, we'll be back with more very soon, and we will talk to you then.
See ya.